First, let everybody know the best wetsuit on the market, the Colby Plus Yamamoto Green Wave. The 3-2 chest zip is now in stock. You might not need the 3-2 right now, but I would say get it now. Save it for the fall because they may not be in stock in the fall. But this is one reviewer on their website last month said, best wetsuit, warm and flexible. I literally tried every wetsuit on the market. The Colby Plus Yamamoto Green Wave is the most flexible, warmest suit I've ever worn. The Green Wave jersey truly does set it apart from other Yamamoto 40 wetsuits. It's far more flexible while still maintaining warmth, and I imagine I'll be wearing this suit through the winter as well. Truly amazing. So that's that.
Yeah, look, with the Super El Nino coming our way, there's going to be a lot of surf, and you're going to want to be prepared. The last thing you want when you're in expert conditions is a failure on a wetsuit or a leash or a fin or whatever. So make sure you have your act together. Colby, the 3-2 Yamamoto Green Wave, and also the 4-3, and you'll be able to buy these right now, of course, and you should. And I have one. They'll also be at the Boardroom show in October as we get into that 3-2 season, that wintertime season in the fall.
Look, the last thing you want to do is even think about your wetsuit. And that's the great thing about the Yamamoto and the Green Wave is it's like surfing in trunks. You don't even think about it.
It's so nice. It's ridiculous.
I mean, we're almost at the point where I'd rather be in a wetsuit than trunks, to be honest.
No, I'm absolutely there already. That's like one of the many old man stages. But when you're like, yeah, the water's 70, but I'm going to put on my full suit because I just don't want any hint of being cold at all.
And the protection that it gives you on your chest so you're not dealing with the rash, all that kind of thing. The downside previously was that you might get a rash or discomfort from the wetsuit, but now the wetsuit's more comfortable than no wetsuit. So pretty remarkable to live in this modern time.
And the protection from vanity, people don't want to look at my chest. If I'm covered up, I look a little bit better.
I like fitted shapewear that sucks me all in. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
And then, of course, always realwatersports.com. These guys, look, they've always been a great retailer, but they're turning into a media powerhouse at this point. They were at the Stab High event. They're going on surf trips. They're documenting those. They're doing the surfboard reviews. They've become, I don't know, I'm using them for entertainment now as much as I'm using them for retail.
Yeah, no, they do a great job with content. Of course, Tripp and his partner. I want to say his partner's name's Brett. Is that right?
Jake.
Jake, and wow, they do put out a ton of content, and what a wonderful retail outlet as well. So, and by the way, of course, Real Water Sports, the Boardroom Best in Show Board Build-Off. The Best in Show Board Build-Off, David, presented by Real Water Sports, is offering $5,000 for first prize. Winner take all, $5,000. Build us a big wave gun. It's the Super El Nino Big Wave Gun edition of the Boardroom Best in Show Board Build-Off this year in October. We've already got some major players who have entered the fray, and we're pretty excited. Among them, Tim Stamps and Strauch and quite a few other guys. John Opito from Rosburn. Many people.
Love it. Yeah, so Real Water Sports, not only a great retailer, but making investments into the board building community in many ways. So check them out anytime you need anything for any water sport. It's realwatersports.com.
As we see some movement at the takeoff zone, it's Kelly Slater grabbing rail.
Yeah, guy. Yeah, guy. There was almost a meditative Ohm moment as a viral sort of rhythm was kind of manifesting in my gut and moving its way into my chest area.
I didn't see it coming, but it really hit me too midway through there. It sent me into a place of Zen, the resonance, as my bones started vibrating.
Fair enough.
I love it. I realize I need a hat. Hold on a second. You see what that says?
The Raglan Surf Report.
That's
Look,
nice.
our buddy's coming to Chicama with you guys.
Luke Cederman putting out the funniest content on the internet lately for the last 5 years, I'd say.
Yeah.
As surf related. His video he posted this morning or yesterday about alpha males burning other people in the lineup was pure gold. I don't know if you saw that.
No, but I need to check it out. I'm a big fan of his, and he brings some levity to an otherwise sort of toxic environment that we call surf content. I don't know.
Well, we love him for it. And look, if you want to spend time with him, quality time, extended quality time, join us in Chicama. This is August 22nd. I literally think it's one room, and you can fit 3 people in the room. So up to 3 people, but or you can just book the room by yourself. But last spot basically available. I'm coming. I'm hosting. Luke is coming to hang and surf. And it's right there at the main wave at Chicama, overlooking it. It's a beautiful location. The hotel's amazing. Luke's going to be there all week on the trip with us. So if you can come, gobble up that spot, do it. Now's your chance because it's not going to last.
Well, you guys are going to have a great time. And boy, the southern hemisphere has been firing up swell after swell, low pressure after low pressure, moving underneath New Zealand and firing its way, moving up northerly into the South Pacific and the southern hemisphere. There's quite a few swells on the horizon. Of course, the big one hit yesterday here in Southern California, basically almost washing out lowers. I mean, lowers was 8 to 10 feet. It gets to that size where, you need a bigger board actually out there. And it was just nonstop swell train. The interesting thing about this swell, at least from the San Diego perspective, is that its steep angle made it so that it bypassed most of San Diego County. From Carlsbad north, there was plenty of surf, but it was noticeably smaller for San Diego Central beaches, just 4 to 5 to 6 feet, and you could kind of see the swell passing by on the horizon, and plus, the 20-second interval doesn't help either. There was a lot of hype around yesterday for swell, and I know that in Southern Orange County it fully provided. The wedge was pumping, as I mentioned, lowers, Cotton, San Onofre pumping, but San Diego sort of bypassed and a little bit wonky, and it left a lot of us wanting, I guess I should say.
Well, yeah, wedge was, you're right, pumping, but also too big. Like to your point about lowers, wedge can get too big to where it is just mountains of water, but it's not barreling,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I was on the wedge cam quite a bit yesterday, just kind of seeing what was happening. And there was one, like Sage Burke, you probably saw that. So the Couchsurfing guys, what do they call that? They have like a live Instagram feed where they do.
Couchsurfing is what they call it.
Yeah.
Here's the Sage Burke wave, by the way. This is my must-see moment presented by Treeswax, treeswax.com, promo code SPIT for 20% off. But yeah, so you're always going to deal with a backwash out there. That's what took down Sage. And look, when I say it's too big, I know a lot of wedge purists are laughing at me for even saying that because it's totally surfable and it's not too big. I'm just saying from a spectator standpoint, I love the days that are 10 to 12 feet that are barreling and guys are getting shacked and, trying to navigate a closeout, basically. This is the next level up from that. And it is wonky because of all the backwash. So it's super duper challenging. But this was kind of the ride of the afternoon by Sage Burke.
I mean, that's a huge wave. He's on an 8.6 is what I understood from some of the Instagram posts that I read. Quite a big gun. There was another one earlier in the day that he caught where he kind of, at that moment, there was no backwash. He did kind of a soul arch type of situation. And it was on that Couchsurfing Instagram feed.
So yeah, shout out to Couchsurfing, the Alani brothers. They have a media company, but they were doing the Couchsurfing thing regularly a couple of years ago, like every swell in Southern California, from Lowers to Huntington to Newport, wherever. And then just based on their YouTube channel, I checked it out yesterday while I was watching the feed. They haven't done it for about a year, but they've been busy professionally with, paying gigs. But it's great to have them back. And this was, of course, a swell and a location that we all want to watch. So great to see them back in action.
Yeah, it was an exciting day of surfing throughout Orange County yesterday. I mean, I'm sure you're going to see a lot of footage of some crazy big lowers, lefts, and it continues. Like I said, like the Southern Hemisphere is really ramping up. I'm sure you guys will get some great waves in Chicama, at Chicama.
Undoubtedly. Look, last year we didn't even really align with a proper swell when we were down there, and it was still chest high the whole time and pouring waves in all day long. Not a lull throughout the day. So it's a super rich zone.
Well, I have a Who Said That if you're at all interested in getting stumped.
I'm interested in winning, not interested in getting stumped, but I will play.
Okay. Well, here we go. Who said that? David. Read your snakebite instruction kit. Go for a walk in the jungle. And you still may get bit by a Gabon viper or a spitting cobra or some other poisonous snake in these parts. And then forget what the instructions said to do. The heat cuts down on a lot of your activities when you sweat while doing simple thing like eating. It's hot and there's little way around it. Who said that, David? Was it A, Sam George, B, Bernie Baker, C, Kevin Naughton, or D, Bob Rotherham?
Bob Rotherham.
No, David, you're wrong. Incorrect. It was Kevin Naughton, famous surf traveler and writer. Kevin Naughton, who teamed up with Craig Peterson and were sort of the Surfer Magazine, traveling duo for quite a long time. And they would send in their reports to Pesman and those guys at Surfer, and voila.
That was a tough one.
Yeah,
I had no point of
Rotherham in there to sort of put the El Salvador spin on it, thinking you might take the hook, and you did.
I did, absolutely. Well played. By the way, Stab Magazine, in their coverage of El Salvador, they have a local surfer whose name I'd never seen before, writing the daily contest reports for them. And I think he's done a great job. Like, for a writer, maybe he's a writer by trade, but I've never seen him in any surf platform before, his writings. And in one of the day's coverage, he does do a little history on Bob Rotherham. And I thought that was actually really cool, because I don't think I've ever seen it all laid out. Like you hear somebody reference him as Jimmy's dad and like a little bit of a story here, a little bit of a story there, but I'd never seen it kind of beginning, middle, and end laid out in one spot. It wasn't super thorough, but I thought it was just a nice little homage and nod, and very, very relevant, obviously, to the surfing community that's developed and the way that the contests are there now.
Well, I'd like to check that out. I want to say that Bob was from the East Coast, maybe Jersey, maybe even. I don't know if you can pull that up, but, Bob was on the cover of Surfer Magazine.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it was a Craig Peterson photograph even, maybe. I could be wrong on that. But it's my understanding that Naughton and Peterson ran into Rotherham and his crew of guys down there at Petacalco, and they took a photo of that. And that was on Bob's journey south, where he eventually ended up in El Salvador and stayed put.
Yeah, he said one of the early characters in the story of surfing in El Salvador, he arrived at La Libertad in 1973, and unlike most surfers passing through Central America at the time, never really left. Yeah, it goes on to talk about him and him being there, but it doesn't say where he was from originally.
Yeah. Well, I could be wrong. He might be from California. I spent some time with him, and my sort of feeble memory banks are telling me that he was from the East Coast originally.
Where did you spend time with him? In El Salvador?
Yeah, in El Salvador. I went down and surfed with Jimmy 2 or 3 times and spent time, at the cafe there, at his little restaurant at the hotel thing there. This was, a long time ago, 25 years ago.
Okay. What was your impression?
I love Bob. He was super fun to hang out with, had great stories. Very insightful, fun guy, intelligent guy, just like his son, Jimmy.
Yeah. Man, imagine El Salvador in 1973.
Oh, my God. I mean, it was actually, I think, then even more peaceful. It was really kind of gnarly, I want to say, in the 80s, when they had the Civil War.
Yeah. I mean, the Civil War thing, totally a different like that, definitely worth having a conversation about. But I'm just thinking in terms of it's pretty, not inhospitable, but it's rugged now with the heat and the humidity. Imagine back then with no air conditioning, no nothing,
I know. Yeah. It's funny, there's some mention that you kind of adapt and get used to the heat. Your body will just, if you don't have air conditioning, you don't know how good you're missing it. You know what I mean? And you just you just roll with it, and somehow there's an adaptation that occurs. And I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but I imagine that's what happened with anybody that was down there. 73 in El Salvador. It really would be an interesting to get somebody to write about that or, tell us about that, because it was probably quite innocent relative to 1980.
For sure.
There was probably a propped up CIA government that was working fine and everything was peaceful. And then all of a sudden, there was a breakaway.
Well, certainly that book exists.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's been written about. But then you look at the waves and you're like, well, if you had access to that wave that's super consistent and reliable, and there's nobody that's willing to stick it out with you, that's kind of the ideal scenario.
I know. I often say that it's like a poor man's J-Bay, Punta Roca. Yeah. It's a poor man's J-Bay.
Yeah.
And what a great wave. Super fun. It's actually on. The contest is on right now.
Is it?
And it's that super brown water. There's a hurricane that's right off the coast, or a tropical storm, Christina, which is literally right off the coast, but it's blowing offshore. And so they're having the event. And as I mentioned, it's that really brown water. And, but it's they're kind of killing it. Leo just got an 8.17. And,
all right, I'm turning it on.
There's some definite waves happening.
Well,
speaking of, yeah, go ahead.
Let's go ahead and transition into the event itself. By the way, I was Googling frantically while we were talking to try to figure out where he's from. And I think it said Miami. That's the best I could find.
Yeah.
First thing that needs to be mentioned is I did pay you $50 for our bet.
I am so glad you brought that up. That's been on the tip top of my tongue here. I've been wanting to bring this up. Thank you. So you Venmo'd me $50. That's very kind of you. And a lot of people lost their butt in Survival League in that heat. Felipe Toledo versus Kali Vost.
Brutal. I mean, the upsets, that was a huge one. So that eliminated a lot. I don't know what the percentage was of Survival League. Ethan Ewing lost to Callum Robson.
Griffin
Colapinto lost to Al Cleland Jr. Stephanie Gilmore lost to Anat Leilior, which is also a shocker. So, I mean, yeah, Survival League must be ravaged at this point.
And fantasy teams. I know my fantasy team was ravaged. Who didn't have Ethan Ewing as their double point, whatever they call it? I had him as okay, he's good for double points. And I think a lot of people had Stephanie with double points thinking, okay, it's a right point. Why wouldn't you? So, yeah.
She's coming off a win at a right point break. You know what I mean? It was a lock. But this is what I was saying before the event started, where I was like, look, Callum could beat Ethan. I think I used that as an example because everybody has grown up grooming their surfing on this style of wave. Everybody is comfortable in this style of surf. And there's just not that much disparity between the tip top and the next 2 or 3 tiers at a wave like this in the way that there is at Pipe and Chopu.
To further your point, Marco Mignon beat Iago Dora. By the way, Calum's still in it. He's already advanced to quarterfinals.
When did Marco beat Yago? Was that this morning?
No, yesterday or the day before, they ran 2 or 3 heats before the wind got crazy.
I missed
So they
that.
just did like one of those, turned it on for an hour and a half and then turned it off. And one of those heats was Marco Mignot. In fact, it was the last heat, I think, before they.
You're brutal, dude. I'm looking at the scores now. That is rough for Yago.
Yeah, it was pretty heavy, and it was, it was turning really windy during that heat. Yago was trying to do airs at one point. It just wasn't happening. So,
well, we don't need to, I guess we state this every show, so why stop now? But the waves are the stars and the surf was massive. And it's great to see people having to kind of navigate that, decide where to place their turns, decide whether to actually hit the lip or not, do the foam climb or not. All of that adds an extra element of excitement for this event.
Yeah. And you already mentioned it, but again, the women's heats got kind of rattled by upsets too. So it's going to be, there's one big heat coming up, which is Gabe versus Jack Robinson. That's a heat that, but again, they're all worth watching. I mean, it's a lot of action happening for sure.
Well, Jack, I would love to, I've proven I'm terrible at betting on surfing, so please don't listen to my advice ever. However, Gabriel Medina looks like the standout in all the free surf footage, all the warm-ups, all that kind of thing. And Jack Robinson, of course, is unbelievably equipped in this style of surf. But Gabe is the man to beat, I think, in that matchup.
Well, I would agree, and I think Gabe's the man to beat all season long, even though it's funny, like we're at this stage now when if Gabe doesn't make a semi, we're like, oh, it was a horrible event for him. You know what I mean? And it's because he got taken out by Idolo or some other excellent surfer, Baron Mamiya versus Alan Cleland, that's kind of interesting. Those two guys haven't been on our radar at all.
But they're both big, powerful surfers that are geared to go toe-to-toe with this style of wave.
And Jiao Chianca makes a visit into round 3, which is I don't think has happened. I don't remember you and I speaking about Jiao at all.
We haven't spoken about Joao since his injury. Like he was number 1 for the opening of a certain season a couple of years ago. Incredible result at Pipe, great beginning of the season, and then he's kind of fallen off the radar, but he is a world-class surfer that as long as he can recover from that injury and find that original form, he would be a contender for the top 5.
A couple of things the commentator said that I've talked to you about this before, but the waves were huge when they started the event, and there was discussion amongst the commentators that surfers should bypass the bigger waves and go for the smaller waves where there's more scoring potential. And there's something that, and I get it, I understand it, you don't have to explain it to me, but there's something that's wrong about that. It seems to me that when you and I and every surfer around the world paddle out and go surfing, the guy that gets the biggest wave is generally, in everyone's hearts and minds, the guy that kind of won the day, if you will, for lack of a better way to phrase it. I mean, when a set comes in, you're like, you want the biggest wave. Like everybody wants the biggest wave. And when that person gets the biggest wave, they paddle back out and people go, oh, you got a bomb, And it's generally celebrated amongst our culture that the guys with the biggest waves did the best. And, that goes back all the way to Waimea Bay. Like they were trying, and I don't know, there's something, I think if you catch a big wave and it doesn't have the scoring potential, you should still be scored highly for it. If it's a 2-turn wave, so what? It was twice as big.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I know you don't need me to explain this to you, but that is true when the wave is challenging. Like if that big wave is a challenge to drop into and to get, but make no mistake, even the biggest wave out here on this day, nobody's afraid of it. Everybody at this level, nobody's afraid. It's not like, oh, I'm not going to take the big one because I'm afraid of it. It's that it's a mush burger and it's flat, And so if you were to say, well, the biggest wave has the most critical takeoff, but it doesn't have turn opportunities down the line, but that critical takeoff is worth scoring. Sure, I'm with you on that. But That's not the case out here. It's the mush burger versus the one that hits the cobbles. And so I think all that we want to see and what's embedded in that original theory that you're talking about is, quote, critical. So what's the critical nature of this wave? The bigger wave is often the more critical wave because of the takeoff. Out here, that's not the case. The more critical wave is the one that is standing up, top to bottom down the line, and being able to do turns in that is way more critical than taking off on a big wave.
Yeah, I'll push back a little bit. I don't think the wave's a mush burger on the big sets. It's, if anything, it's super fast. You got to ride high, and then get around the section. All those ride high moments are moments on a slightly smaller wave. You would have been banging 2 or 3 turns. And, but yeah, I get it. Now, another thing, I don't know if you noticed this, but there's a section on this wave where people were just failing. It's after the first 2 or 3 turns, there's a kind of a dead section. And we saw Steph Gilmore eat shit there. We saw a lot of surfers. I'm watching people right now. I mean, it's happened numerous times where after about the 3rd turn, there's this fat section and people's fins, people's boards are failing them. And they're falling, they're sketching. Have you noticed that section? And have you thought about, wow, what does that mean for board designer? I don't know if they have, I feel like people are a little slightly undersized on their boards, on their board choice.
Just to confirm whether or not I'm thinking of the same kind of part of the wave as you, it seems to me, obviously the pacing on that part changes, but then if it connects, there's another wave that connects that's a little bit inside. And so you have to scoot through that section and reconnect down into a low road to get the next track of the same wave.
Exactly. It just basically kind of goes deep for one moment.
It goes
got all
deep.
the speed and it goes deep and flat and then they lose it.
But it goes deep, but it's also not like you can just stay in the pocket and wait for it to connect. You almost have to skate down into a low road to reconnect with the wave down there. And that's where I feel like people's pacing is off. I remember the Stephanie wave you're talking about. I saw Kanoa do the same thing.
I did too.
Yeah. So it's like they get to that point and they're in a forward momentum doing the carve, but they're already almost off the back of the wave. So instead of that forward momentum, they need to adjust and kind of connect at the bottom of the whitewash to catch the low road and start going again. Or hit that section, because that ultimately that low road, it almost creates a left that you can bank off of. So it's either maintain the momentum off that first section of the wave and then come in hot and heavy into that back of the low road wave and do an air or bang it hard, or make the decision to take the low road and get 5 more mediocre turns on the inside.
Yeah, well, it's a little section to take note of as we go through here.
Well, I, again, don't take my advice, but Leonardo Fioravanti at this point in the event looks like my dark horse to win. Obviously, Gabriel Medina would be the obvious pick, but Leonardo looks so good to me.
Well, I secretly want Jack Robinson to win the event because of the drama that occurred with Jack. Maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but of course, everyone knows that made the rounds on social media that Jack Robinson was sent in by a local surfer for basically cutting him off, dropping in on the local surfer. And the local surfer shot his board at Jack, and then Jack was like, "What's that?" and kicked out, and then they paddled up and had words, and Jack went in. You know what I mean? Like, and in some ways, I'm kind of like tip of the cap to that for not escalating. That could have, somebody's ego could have gotten involved there and just like, drawn a line in the sand and said, you know what, even though I'm a professional surfer, I'm going to do something really bad for my career here. But he didn't. He took, if you will, the high road, speaking of low roads. And he went in with a smile on his face. I'm certainly not here to condone what he did. But there's been a lot of interesting conversation on the commentary sections of websites about this.
So I tried to pull up the clip right now, but we're having a technical glitch. It may pop up in a second, and then I'll be able to play it. Our good buddy Tony Roberts actually filmed that clip. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Yeah, he sent that to me. Tony did.
That's right. Okay. So Real Surf Stories is his YouTube channel, which you should follow because he's actually on the cobbles every morning documenting the free surfs, probably in the afternoon too. And he's publishing those on Surf Stories YouTube channel, so you can see how everybody's surfing outside of the event. And basically, one of the mornings in the warm-ups, Jack Robinson burned a local. The local actually kicked his board at Jack Robinson, and then Jack ends up kicking out of the wave down the line, and Tony filmed the confrontation. And the local, you can't hear what they're saying, but the local's pointing into the beach, and then eventually Jack goes ahead, turns around, and paddles into the beach. I agree with you. Good on Jack for copping the heat. From what we saw, he burned somebody, which is a no-no, no matter how good you surf or how many stickers you have on your board. And the local obviously was a very competent surfer as well, and he knew his place in the lineup, and so he didn't enforce violence on Jack. He told him to go in, which is the right way to handle it. And so kudos to Jack for going in. The problem I had here was with the board flick. The board flick's dangerous.
Yeah.
So that's where I would look at the local and be like, hey, man, everything was cool up until that, and now you're equally culpable or you're equally to blame. And nothing went wrong, thankfully, but that's not the right way to handle it.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that. What could have happened? You know, that would have been horrific. You know,
well, Jack ducked. I mean, Jack. There's versions of doing the board flick that doesn't put anybody else in harm's way. It's like just to make a point, basically. This was one that came pretty close, and if you severely maimed
exactly
a world title contender,
yeah,
this is bad news for you and
that
for
young
El Salvador.
surfer would be in jail. This would be an international incident.
Yeah.
And the Australian consulate would get involved, and I guarantee you the president of El Salvador would find that young El Salvadorian surfer and put him in jail.
Yeah.
Like, this is not something you get away with anymore in El Salvador, especially in this sort of context.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. So
thank God that didn't happen.
But Jack, so the other thought I had initially when I was watching this was just how freaking hard it is to warm up as a CT surfer. And it's true almost anywhere in the world, but I think it's extra difficult at places like this, or certainly Saquarema in Brazil, where it's kind of like, it's user friendly, you know, like there's an element of, I don't know, cloud break that susses out the crowd. And then the crowd that remains has kind of a real respect for the hierarchy. So they're going to give way to Jack and Gabe. But out at El Salvador, it's kind of like everybody's qualified to be out there, and it's just a lot of chaos in the lineup. So I sympathize with the CT surfers who actually don't have a roped off, cordoned area to go warm up for the event, you know?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting situation, and I'm hoping that Jack moves through the event. I just think it would be interesting to see him on the, here we go. Is this it?
Finally got the clip to work. So people could watch it. Obviously, we already talked about it, but a couple people were mentioning, I noticed this, but a couple of people were mentioning the spray on the bottom of that guy's board is the Rising Sun logo, which is Jack Robinson has had that painted on his Eric Arakawa's in honor of Andy Irons in the past. So they're wondering if that was one of Jack's old boards that the Loke was riding.
Oh, man.
Which would be extra funny. So anyways, what were you saying?
I kind of forget what I was saying, but yeah.
Well, I will say I'm glad to see Jack carrying no trauma from this event. Like, he went out in his next heat and ripped, and he still is in the event. So it's good to see he's kind of unflappable.
That would have killed him. I mean, that was pretty close. It was a very aggressive and high velocity kick.
I mean, look at how close they are. He's trying to hit him.
Yeah.
Like, again, there's a version of doing this where you're just trying to make a point. That was actually trying to make contact.
Yeah. That's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Well, we shall see how Jack does. The waves are kind of killer, and it's so glassy, and it's really smooth out there right now for Leo's heat. I had something else.
Well, one thing that I will say while you're looking at your other note is kind of the main storyline coming out of this, other than the waves itself and the upsets, are just the interference situations. There was two that occurred 2 days in a row that were the fault of the WSL and the priority judge, that had consequential effects. And so, did you see both of these?
No, fill me in.
So the first one was Sally Fitzgibbons versus Molly Picklum. It was the beginning of the heat. The reason why I can speak to the way this all laid out is that Renato, in real time, you don't know who made the mistake, and even the commentators are confused. They're blaming Sally for making the mistake. Renato Hickel comes on later, a half hour later, and explains what happened. And what he explained happened was that it was the beginning of the heat, no priority was established, but the priority judge accidentally switched the sign to blue momentarily. Wow. So during that time, Sally saw that she had priority. The priority judge realized that he had made the mistake, so he switched it back to neutral because it's the beginning of the heat. Sally had seen that it was blue, paddled for a wave. Actually, I'm sorry, Molly took off on a wave, but Sally had seen that the sign was blue, so she straight burns Molly. Molly, who is unaware of the sign accidentally having been switched to blue, knowing it's the beginning of the heat and it should be neutral, she's on her wave with priority because she was deeper on the point. Sally burns her. They both throw their hands up. Sally's like, what's Sally? Molly says, what's Sally doing? Sally's looking at the beach going, what are you guys doing? The sign was blue. They both paddle back out. They're communicating with each other. The judge realizes it was his fault, so they restarted the heat. They're like, look, there was no meaningful scores yet. It was an accident. We're going to restart the heat. Everything starts from scratch. Molly went on to win that heat. That's settled. The very next day, Liam O'Brien versus Calum. Calum takes off down the point, like with priority, rightful priority. What Renato explained, and then what ends up happening is Liam burns him on the wave. And Calum kicks out, and Liam keeps going, and he's looking back like, what happened? Blatant burn. What Renato explains later is that when Calum took off with priority in blue, he's now up riding the wave, Liam's down the line. Because Calum took off, the priority judge switched the sign from blue to red.
Oh.
At which point, Liam glances up, sees that it's red, and goes, oh, I guess I have priority, burns Calum. So what the priority judge should have done was, of course, wait until Calum finishes the wave to switch the sign. Yeah. Super simple mistake, but again, very consequential because Liam lost the heat. He got an interference. And this was the interference when you burn somebody like that, it's an interference where you only get one wave scored. There's another version of the interference rule where you get a second wave cut in half. Why didn't they
restart that heat? I don't understand why they didn't restart that heat. Or
there was
Liam didn't do anything wrong.
There was meaningful scores already on the board.
But Liam didn't do anything wrong.
Correct. The judge did.
And he got, that seems, I don't know, man. Nothing, Liam doesn't have any recourse?
I don't know. Again, it's a failure. Both situations were failures of the WSL staff, and it happened 2 times in a row and had meaningful consequence. So you're right. There should be recourse. I don't know what's fair in this scenario, you know?
Mm.
But again, Callum took off on the wave with priority, and the judge switched it immediately. It's a mistake.
It's kind of rookie.
It's very rookie.
Like, this is supposed to be the World Surf. I mean, that's just, I know mistakes happen, but all you got to do is wait until the surfer passes by the other surfer before you flip it.
Yeah. Yeah. So those things absolutely need to be ironed out. And it's shocking that we're having mistakes like this.
That's a pretty big flub.
And again,
Liam O'Brien is absolutely screwed.
This is not my speculation or just my opinion off viewing what happened. This was Renato coming on air and stating what happened.
Yeah. but without any recourse for Liam. Just like, yeah, this would happen. We're moving on.
Maybe they're having those conversations privately.
I wonder if there's some way he should get some points or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, because Liam also, when he took off and burned Callum on that, he did a sick turn afterwards. It was like a triple overhead wave, and he just like cranked it right in the most critical section. So Liam, could have won the heat. He was a contender in that heat.
And Liam is secretly one of our, I mean, I can't speak for you, but he's kind of secretly one of my favorite surfers on tour. I like
when I see him, yeah, I mean, I do too. I love his surfing. When he put out that edit from Hurricane or Cyclone Alfred, I think it was, on the Gold Coast, he was surfing waves that looked very much like this. That triple overhead size and like doing incredible turns like that.
Was that a Burley heads?
Yeah, it was Burley.
Yeah.
There was Burley and there was Kira in that video. Well, moving on from those priority flubs, I've got a listener call that I want to play for you. This actually came in last week, but it's relevant to this week as well. The platform we're recording on is updated, and so it's a little bit different. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear the audio when I play it.
Hey, David and Scott, it's your East Coast Hall of Fame historian. Couple points. First one, just wanted to note that Hank Bizak was born in Brooklyn and had done about, I think he was 19 when he moved to California, so a lot of his roots were out on that Long Island beach breaks from the 60s. And second, it really is a conversation of what you guys were talking about and spit regarding, Americans not in the top 10 per se, and Erin Brooks, not performing as well this year. And I kind of wonder, it's to be on the tour, it almost means you have to have some money with a lot of folks. And Erin, anecdotally, we're all aware that she comes out of a wealthy family, which is great. She's a talented kid. But is there a scrappiness that gets lost when you're kind of handed the best coaches, the best spots? You don't have to go to school. I mean, we see it a lot in Southern California. I'm back east right now for a while, and I see it with some of the kids back here. Do you not learn that grittiness that you see with guys like Italo, that was, was he surfing on the top of an ice chest piece? So, quick question, your thoughts on it. Is the process of becoming a pro surfer better when you kind of fight the grit? Eventually, you're going to run into that when you're in a heat, and hopefully you have the chops to be able to pull that out. So, quick question, and our rest in peace, Hank. He was. I saw him a lot at Grandview. Jesus, he was something. Later, boys.
Oh, that's a great call. Thank you so much for the call. And Hank was a legendary guy, and it doesn't surprise me at all that he has some New York. Of course, I knew that he had some New York in him, and that came out rather obvious and strong whenever you were around Hank. He didn't suffer fools. He'd tell you how he felt about everything.
Brooklyn specifically. It's like a very Brooklyn thing.
Right. Well, of course, to answer or to discuss this, there is no doubt, and David and I have discussed this before at length, but look at some of the surfers. First of all, the Brazilians, as was mentioned in the call, most of them are especially Elo, but they have to kind of scrap for their living. Although I can't speak specifically to the socioeconomic status of the Brazilian surfers, but I've sensed through my travels that if you're a traveling Brazilian surfer, you come from the upper middle class. And Elo, I think, was literally from, the ghetto, whatever they call those ghettos there, the barrios or whatever. They have a name for it.
Favela.
Yeah, thank you. And but I mean, I like, I look at like East Coast surfers, like even Kelly. There is something to be said for having to scrap for it and having to have a little bit of anxiety about this is your paycheck, whereas surfers that are given a lot early. We don't have to name names, but think about the world champions. Which world champion do you know that didn't have to kind of scrap their way? Give me some names. Where am I wrong? Andy scrapped.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Andy scrapped. Believe it or not, Kelly scrapped early, before he signed with. But he's from a tough, lower middle class Floridian upbringing.
Yeah, a little bit of a rough home life too, as he's spoken about with his dad. Real quickly, not to interject, not to derail, because I'll come back to it, but Sammy Pupo just landed the craziest air. Did you see that?
I'm watching the replay right now. Here we go. He needs a 7.84 to get through.
So he's on a wave that has the potential score. He combos it up at the beginning, not super, super critical, but this section, boom.
Oh, yeah, he pulled it.
Double overhead, full fin fanger.
A fin fanger?
Well, because it was an air, but the front of the board was kind of in the water still.
Or it was a big section, though. That final section, that's kind of a ballsy move.
But Leo also just put a massive score on the board with his previous ride. So, yeah. Are you watching?
This is really good heat. This is really good heat.
Are you watching Leo's right now?
Yeah, I just watched Leo's. Yeah, not as good.
That first turn was sick, but yeah, only 2 turns.
Leo's been doing some really nice turns. Those first turns have been really killer.
I'm falling in love with Leo throughout the course of his career. Okay, anyways. American softness. Yes, 100% agree with everything.
Upper middle class.
So I'm
not even American. It can be anywhere.
I'm going to differentiate those terms in a second, but I want to start by saying, as you and I have analyzed this over the years, what the conclusion that I've come to is having access to all those privileges when you're young, all of it's beneficial to get you onto the tour. So it's a major advantage to get to the big show. The difference between the big show and winning the titles that you're talking about now is that hard scrabble childhood. So you can see, obviously, you can't afford to travel the world. You can't even afford to get to contests without that support system. Then if you have sponsors who then have handlers, like if you work for one of the big companies and they have team managers, now all of a sudden, you don't even have to think about booking your rental car. You don't have to think about where to eat, where to book your hotel. All of that's covered. So you going on the tour, having all that solved for you allows you to focus on your heat, focus on the training, focus on the hydration and the diet, all that, which allows you, again, to make it through the QS and the Challenger Series and get to the big show. Once you're on the big show, the difference between 20th and first place is now grit, because all those people are at that level, like have the hotel thing worked out. They've been doing it for a few years now. All of that's sorted. So what's the difference between getting from 20th to first? And it is digging deep inside you. And by the way, not in this event, 20th to first. It's doing it throughout the course of the entire event 12 times throughout the year, or whatever, 10 times, I guess, is what the number is now. Like that gritty determination to do it year round through the 1 foot days and the 20-foot days comes from hard scrabble DNA. And if you don't have it, there's no manufacturing it, full stop.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think of world champions in other sports too. Serena Williams, the Williams sisters in tennis, the ultimate hard scrabble, from the public tennis courts, grinding, and being basically, pushed down because of their socioeconomic status. And when you think of nation states like Australia, which has a really healthy middle class and that tall poppy syndrome, there's a lot of hard scrabble there, and I think if you're from upper middle class or upper class fiscally and you're given everything on a pillow, it's going to hurt you in the end, because you're just not going to have that steely determination that coming from the hood kind of gives you.
So does Mick Fanning, is he the example that defies what we're talking about?
Defies or You mean like Mick Fanning was from upper class Australia?
Mick Fanning had access at an early age and a support system, and he still went on to win 3 world titles.
Well, see, what's interesting is that the access that Australia gives you is a governmental nation-state surfing system. The access that our system gives you is if you got money, you just buy your way in. But if you don't, there's no government body that like nurtures, that sees the young Mick Fanning and goes, okay, all you young Mick Fannings, come join the Australian surfing, whatever they call it. You know, it's a governmental body. You know, I think on a federal level, I don't know if they have a federal system, but you know, on a nation state level, they have the Australian surfing, and I think even on even within their states, they have it. And yeah, we have USA Surfing, but we don't have the resources because we're not. You know, Australia is funded by the government. You know.
So I said I wanted to differentiate a couple of terms. I think that there is the socioeconomic thing that was referenced. Needing to fight your way out of poverty is one real thing that we've seen. Italo's a great example of that. Adriano de Souza was a previous great example of that, where it's like, I need to win this heat because I have 3 families back home whose rent I'm paying or mortgage I'm paying. So that's a real motivator, right? The other kind of privilege or comfort that gets lumped in with that sometimes, I think, is just a environmental comfort. So Maui is often plagued with this, maybe all of Hawaii, but Maui is plagued with this, where so many unbelievably talented pro surfers come out of Maui but never break through to the next level of like A-tier surfer because they don't want to leave Maui. Maui's incredible. You know what I mean? So, and they have incredible waves. And so why would you go travel halfway around the world to surf crappy waves? Just go back home and enjoy your life. Like, if you make all the millions in the world and retire, you'll just come back to Maui. So why not just do it for the next 40 years instead of the end of your life? So I think the example, so Southern California, unfortunately, is privilege in terms of socioeconomic privilege, but also a bit of privilege in terms of comforts. It's pretty dang comfy and you don't want to leave. Brazil is the opposite. So when you have examples in Brazil, like Gabriel Medina maybe had some socioeconomic stability, but it's still not like the most, you know, gorgeous place. Like, it's still a city and a suburban metropolis that you do want to get out of, and you still want to go see other parts of the world. And the waves aren't great there. So you also want to go surf great waves. So I think that's where we have so much success coming out of Brazil at this level on the world tour, is that there is a real socioeconomic disparity there, where there is the haves and the have-nots. But even the haves have this environmental kind of crush that they do want to get out of.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't want to speak as if I'm an expert on the way the Australian surfing system works, but it's my understanding that it's you know, nationally run, and it's robust. It's funded by the government. You know, we don't have that here.
Yeah.
So yeah, to answer the caller's question, or to speak to it, we both agree that there's a certain grittiness that is required. I'm just trying to think of a past world champion that didn't come from either a middle class like Australia or a real gritty upbringing. You know, like you think of Lane Beachley, gritty, you know, not even gritty, just think about Australia again. It's this middle class. There's no millionaires, you know, whereas here we have millionaires that are like, hey, son, you want to be a pro surfer? Let me pay your way. You know, I'm not saying that that's the case, but with the names that were mentioned in the call, I'm just suggesting to you that there are, it's definitely, go ahead, please.
I've got 2.
Okay.
But we might be able to argue against it. John Florence and Carissa Moore.
Okay. You think that they don't have the grit because of their socioeconomic status?
I think that they were both raised with privilege and a very healthy support system.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess you got to tease apart privilege.
John, so I know John's upbringing better than I know Carissa's. And John obviously had a single mom, without a lot of financial means in his earliest days, but by the age of 6 or 7, had industry support, and despite not having the father present in his life, had a very robust community support.
Okay, I would agree with all of that, but would you say it was a middle-class upbringing?
Yes.
Yeah, not like a millionaire upbringing.
Well, the millions came very shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two examples that don't quite fit. And it seems, I don't know Carissa's socioeconomic status in her early youth, but again, very quickly got industry support and a lot of money, and it didn't seem to derail her determination.
Well, it's funny. So when we think of John, like we're like, okay, young surfer that got tons of money early. And then we think of others. You and I have mentioned others. I'm not even going to mention their names here because I don't necessarily need to throw them under the bus. But there are others that were given a lot early and were expected to win world titles. In fact, 2 of them are still on tour that I'm thinking of. And they're just, and so they fall into the same category as John.
Yeah.
They all 3 of them were given lots of support, fiscal support early on, and were expected to win world titles. John did, the others didn't.
There's far more examples. Yeah.
Yeah, there are. I'm suggesting to you that the ones that I'm thinking of, the 2 that are still on tour didn't have the grittiness that the North Shore provides. Yeah. They had more like, hey, you can paddle out at lowers and own it for the next 20 years. All you got to do is just show up with a sticker on your board and everyone's going to bow down.
Yeah.
You still have to earn it at pipe. Like Johnny Boy and Jamie O'Brien aren't just going to let you own the spot unless you go out there and own the spot.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. So that's the other factor. And I think you basically described in Australia, even if you have the socioeconomic status and the environmental comforts, it's built into the culture there to break you down a bit, to rebuild, to cultivate the grit that we're taking away by giving you privilege. We're taking away the grit, so now we're going to cultivate it through tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah,
and the North Shore has that too.
And we are generalizing, of course, but I think that we've pointed to everyone can point to great examples of this being the case. But
to the caller's point, and the thing that we were alluding to previously, is Southern California is screwed. Because we don't have any system to rebuild the grittiness in you. We only make it soft for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you're a young pro surfer in Southern California, you're just like, I'll go on tour, try the Challenger Series if I'm lucky enough to get there, do it until I'm 23, and then go to law school. That's basically that's the move, and it's a good one, by the way. I'm here for it.
So currently, the Southern California hopes are pinned on Sawyer Lindblad, who's making a run this season, Cole Houshman, Griffin and Crosby Colapinto, who again are all
Alyssa Spencer too.
Alyssa Spencer. So again, all incredible talents that made it to the big show, but now where we're keeping an eye on is, can you get to that next level?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if your parents drop you off in the parking lot and sit there and take photos of you and record everything and become your manager, that's good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a healthy parent, but
well, look,
at some point you need to go, hey, ride your skateboard to the beach if you want it that bad. Prove it to me that you want. You got to make them, ante up a little bit, whatever that means. I don't know.
So Kanoa is a great example of what we're talking about, and he does want a world title. And I say that because his parents did a phenomenal job raising him, and he's earning millions of dollars. And so it's all, like, to me, I'm looking at it going, win, win, win. Just be grateful. There's no way for me to criticize the lifestyle that he's leading, but he wants the world title. That's the one crux here, is like, he wants to get to that next level, and he hasn't been able to yet.
I think that all of them want it. It's just what level of want, what, and
Well,
So are
again,
you telling me that you think Kanoa is going to win a world title?
no, I'm saying you can't manufacture the grit at this point.
Right. So you're saying Kanoa will not win a world title?
No, I don't think he will.
Yeah.
Imagine Kanoa going toe to toe with Gabriel Medina at every event in the season. I would give it to Gabriel 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10. Imagine Kanoa doing the same with Italo, with Jack. You know, it's like he doesn't have a point of difference against those guys. And so sometimes that point of difference is just that early hard scrabble grittiness.
Yeah.
But again, he's got millions of dollars. He's got a great life. He's got a wonderful family. All those things is
Yeah, he's a good human. He's a good young man.
super smart, intellectual,
This is a good young
multilingual.
man tour. Yeah, all those things you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
I
So
got to take a quick break. Let's circle back on that.
we will. Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back to the show.
I wanted to make a note because the caller did mention Erin Brooks, and she's having not a great start to her season. I was very kind of critical of her performance here in El Salvador because she just looked so out of sorts. And I'm like, what happened to Erin Brooks? Lo and behold, she's violently ill. So she posted on Instagram with her in a hospital bed with an IV, and she said, "Thank you so much to the WSL medical staff and everyone who's been praying for me over the last 4 days. Unfortunately, even after 5 IVs and a full round of antibiotics, I still didn't have the strength to surf competitively today. I am back under the doctor's care now and hoping to be back at full strength by Brazil. Being sick while the waves are pumping has been brutal. I can't wait to get back soon." So that's to account for her performance in El Salvador, not necessarily the prior events, but I did want to at least alert people to that there's a reason for her performance.
Well, we've all seen Erin absolutely rip, and there's no doubt that she would be ripping out here. And what did I tell you last time? Remember, the number one thing I was concerned with for these pro surfers is that bug that can get you,
You did.
take you down, and it certainly. I knew somebody was going to fall to that.
Yep.
You know,
Sorry.
that's just, yeah.
Sorry,
The
Erin
odds of
Brooks.
this, you got 68 pro surfers or whatever it is. Somebody's going to go down hard, at least one.
Totally. Are we done talking about that? I've got something else to share with you.
Yeah, we're done.
You'll be pleased to know I had a really, really great conversation with Dan Mann that I'm going to be publishing on Surf Splendor.
Wow, I just was sent a podcast with Dan Mann on, is it Basis Surf or something like that? Somebody sent me a podcast and I listened to it. And it was basically him, and I'm sure you will address this as well, regarding the whole stab in the dark thing.
We go deep into it. You had said, you had come to Dan's defense basically saying, any of the negativity surrounding the Kelly / Firewire controversy shouldn't be directed at Dan, which is totally fair. And my response at the time, I think, was agreed, but I think Dan's the perfect guy for that job because he seems to just be like happy-go-lucky. Like, I can't imagine him being too bothered by any of it. And I talked to him about that, and he was bothered by a lot of it. He got his feelings hurt.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to hear him talk through that and talk through how internet pundits hurt feelings. They leave an effect on people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And it's why, you know, I have a responsibility to do my best to not beat people up on here. And I have no interest in that, by the way. And so sometimes you'll catch me and you throwing out caveats like, hey, we're just, you know, whatever it might be, because the last thing we want to do is cause people turmoil in their lives. Life's hard enough. They don't need other people pounding on them and beating on them and so forth and so on.
Well, he said that he hasn't been on social media, or he doesn't engage in it very often. He doesn't read the comments section, even on the Stab in the Dark videos. So I let him know that all of them are positive comments about him. I never saw, through all of it, I never saw a negative comment about him once. And in fact, anytime his name did come up, it was actually people praising him and saying exactly what you said. So I don't know if that made him feel any better or not, but it's worth noting.
Well, I got to admit, I was, after I listened to the podcast that I listened to yesterday, I was like, I want Dan to make me a surfboard. There was a lot of surfboard discussion about the DRK and the FRK. And I was like, man, I know Dan. First of all, Dan rips. He's been shaping for 30 years. Those are two big check marks right there on the guy you want building your board. And I know he makes Kelly's boards and Kelly likes them. So that's pretty good. 3 checks. I'm all in. Make me a board.
He won the Icons of Foam.
Exactly. He won the Icons of Foam, and he's the defending champ. He'll be shaping in the event in October, defending his title as we honor our Icon of Foam, Maurice Cole, this year at the Boardroom show. It's going to be incredible.
I'll be there. The other thing that I will mention too is, despite how thorough Stab Magazine does of a job at interviewing those shapers and getting them to share their stories, they really didn't share any of Dan Mann's history and story. Like, the only conversation that I see the internet having about Dan is his association with Firewire. And then to a certain degree, he also makes boards, you know, his own label of boards if you want to order a custom. None of it tells the nuance of his history. And he's been, as you mentioned, shaping for over 30 years. He owned a glass shop. So he's been like heavily involved in glassing. They were building CIs, JSs, Rusties. So he's done contract work for all the big boys. So he had his hands on those and communicating directly with Al Merrick, Rusty, Jason Stevenson, gleaning all those insights for years. He's been on the cutting edge of materials experimentation throughout all of it. That's actually what got him into the business. And then has been with Firewire since almost the inception, transitioning from Nev into Firewire. Yep. So Firewire has its own narrative arc that so many people aren't aware of, that he was integral in every step of the way, sometimes helping them develop it, sometimes deviating away from the direction they were going. But it's just like the guy's resume is more robust and qualified at every step of the game than Stab ever even alluded to. And I think that was a disservice.
Yeah, it's interesting. We often talk about the difference between surfboard designers and surfboard shapers and board builders, you know, and Nick Timpone and Jeff Timpone and you and I had this sort of discussion. And I mean, of those guys in Stab in the Dark, if I was to have one guy build me a board from scratch and know it's going to be next level quality, and I mean laminate, sand, do it all, make the fins, Dan Mann's that guy. he's a board builder. He's not a shaper. This guy knows how to build boards from the very beginning. He knows it all. Super smart.
Yep. And then the final thing I'll say, and this is, again, you guys can go listen to this on Surf Splendor this week. Actually, I'm going to publish it. You and I watched Stab in the Dark and we go, what board do you think he looked best on, you know? Well, why? Why did he feel that way? What was he talking about when he came in? Interesting to talk to Dan and be like, what board do you think he looked best on? How did he look on your board? What adjustments would you make to that board? You got one shot at this. You didn't even know it was Ethan Ewing that you were building the board for. Then you saw him ride it. How did he look? What adjustments would you make? And Dan's like, I would have done this different, that different. I would use a different construction, and I would love to get him a second board, you know? So to hear straight from the shaper's mouth that kind of assessment of Stab in the Dark, I thought was also really valuable.
I'm looking forward to hearing that. And, you know, you've got two intelligent people. You've got David Lee Scales and Dan Mann. So you're going to get some good discourse. And so
Thanks.
I'm fired up. Yeah. Fired
Appreciate
up.
it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
By the way, before we go, and I know we're not quite finished, but I do need to shout out the Best in Show Board Build-Off one more time. Best in Show Board Build-Off presented by Real Water Sports. We're giving $5,000 to the winning shaper. Anyone can enter, any shaper around the world. It's free to enter. All you have to do is go to boardroomshow.com, click on Best in Show, and you'll see how to do it. It's basically just send me an email saying I want to be in it, and you're in it. And we're super excited to have Real Water Sports involved again now. And the category is the big wave gun, the Super El Nino big wave gun. And it's going to be an incredible exhibit. And the public's going to get to vote on which one's the best one. So it'll be fun.
Amazing. Cannot wait. I'll be there. I also wanted to remind people something I mentioned last week, but the Paul Strauch paddle out for anybody who wants to attend is going to be at Doheny State Beach on July 22nd from 3 to 6 p.m. Another will be scheduled on Oahu, but if you're around Southern California, July 22nd, you want to participate and honor Paul, that's the date to do it.
Sweet. That'll be good.
And then, of course, always, Surfrider Foundation is with us. I'm a member. Always, I've supported. I mean, that was literally, I don't know if I ever told you this. I got a checkbook when I was 16 years old. And nobody uses checkbooks anymore. But the very first check I wrote out of my checkbook as a 16-year-old was a membership to Surfrider.
That's amazing. That's a really cool story.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much were memberships back then? They were like $20.
I mean, even today, you can set it up for $1. You could set it up for $5. I don't remember what it was back then. Yeah. But I just remember I was subscribed to the magazines, and they had a little tearaway thing in Surfer Magazine, you know, like a little postcard that you just tear out, fill it out, and send it in. And then I think they sent me an invoice after that, maybe. Go ahead.
I was going to say my Surfrider story is after the Japan earthquake happened and the waters off of Fukushima were all, you know, had a bunch of nuclear. Yeah, radioactive, thank you. Had a bunch of nuclear waste and radioactivity in it. I was just really up in arms. I was very upset about what was happening. And I was ranting, you know, I was venting. I was on Facebook or something, and I was just like, you know. And I think I sent something to my friend Jim Moriarty, who was with the Surfrider Foundation, I believe, for a while, way back. And he's like, Scott, you know what? Why don't you do something on the ground, like send Surfrider Foundation Japan a donation, help them, you know? And he was right, you know, like I was just venting. I wasn't doing anything. There was no action behind my words, and he really kind of shook me up in a good way, and it made sense, and so I did that. I sent them some money, but my point is, you know, you can get into action and do the right thing, and joining the Surfrider Foundation is a way to get into action, one simple way. Yeah,
that's, I think, so often you do with politics, certainly with environmental concerns, there's, you feel helpless. You feel very frustrated, and so you want to vent the frustration, but you don't feel there's any actionable things you can do. So then you just vent. But that's what's great about Surfrider is you can take action, and there's power in, like, they're limited by the number of people involved. So you get involved, you amplify the solutions. And it can be financial like you did, or if you don't have the finances, there's beach cleanups. You can do water sampling at your local beach, which they need, and they have labs that you can send it to that then do the next step. There's a million different ways to get involved, no matter what your qualifications are.
Yeah, good call.
So it feels good to be able to put something into action and not just vent. So anyways, surfrider.org, get involved. Also, just want to confirm, did you get a resupply of AG1 recently?
I did.
Okay, good.
It's got a new flavor.
3 new flavors. They've got citrus, mixed berry, and I forget the other one. Tropical.
I'm a big fan of the new flavoring.
Yeah. They're calling it next gen. It's like the updated formulation. They're always kind of iterating on the formulation based on new science and all that sort of stuff. But go to drinkag1.com/surf, listeners, to research it on your own, because I'm no expert nor a dietitian. Scott drinks it. I drink it. I drink the AGZ at night. That's become my favorite nightly routine. But yeah, anyways, drinkag1.com/surf, foundational nutrition.
Okay, well, look, David, we've said a lot. Until next time, adios and aloha.